So today's daf is Kaf Aleph in Eruvin. We're going to start on Kaf Amud Bet, 3 lines from the bottom. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ada. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ada said, "Lo utru pasei beraot ela ole regalim bilvad." That we've been learning in the past couple of dapim about a setup that the rabbis permitted, whereby a person could carry. Normally, you can't carry in an open area; it has to be an enclosed area, reshut hayachid. But they allowed people to make, in an open area, corner pieces. What they would do was an amma by an amma, which means they would have a stick that's an amma in width, and another one that's an amma in width, a board, let's say, and they would make an L shape, a right angle. And at the 4 corners of the enclosure, they would create corners, and that was enough to permit people. What was the reason to make these enclosures? That there was a well in the middle. The problem is that the well is considered reshutei yachid. It's considered an enclosed private domain. And so if you're standing around the well, you're standing in a public domain, you're standing in Reshut HaRabim, you want to take water from the Reshut HaYachid to use it in the Reshut HaRabim, that's no good. So what did they say? They said you can make the whole area a Reshut HaYachid because you put these 4 corners around, and that will allow you to carry from the well out. And this shows sort of like what it looks like. These 4 corner pieces, these different illustrations show you. Up here you could see it in, illustration number 131. There are many illustrations in the book here. Here's one. 124 shows you kind of the style. So basically the corners, the right-angled corners. Did you see that? It's called pasei beraot. So he says, the pasei beraot, this leniency, now normally you need a wall to make an enclosure. So this leniency of allowing you to use corners was only permitted for olei regalim. It was only permitted for the people who came up to Jerusalem for the holiday. Because people who came up to Jerusalem for the holiday, they had to camp out. They were basically it was like Woodstock or something, They didn't have anywhere to go. So if they wanted to, it wasn't so easy for them to get lodging in a hotel or anything like that. So they had to lodge outside. And in order to get water from the well for their animals, for themselves, they needed to be able to access the wells, and so that's why it was permitted for that. But it says in the Braita, didn't we actually say in another Braita that the only time that they allowed the pasei beraot, which is the term for this makeshift enclosure where you just cover the corners, there's no real wall. Okay, if you were to look at it, the north side, there's an amma here and an amma here. An amma is about 1.5 feet. Okay, and the space in between. On this side, there will be an amma and all space in between, because of the way that these corner pieces are situated, right? So, because there's one looking like this here, one looking like this here, and so on, around the perimeter. So it says you can only do this for animals, implying not for people. So the Gemara says, "My behema, behemat olei regalim." Why did they allow them to use the pasei beraot, to use this enclosure that allows you to withdraw water from the well? For the animals, it's not a contradiction to say it's for animals and to say it's for people who came for the festival to Yerushalayim. It's the same thing. It's for the animals of the people who came to the festival in Yerushalayim. So if you had come up to Yerushalayim for Pesach, for example, this year, to make your pilgrimage to the Beit HaMikdash, and you had to camp out, your animals are going to need water. How are you going to be able to draw water out of the well? It's from a Reshut HaYachid to a Reshut HaRabim. How are you going to handle it? You need these pasei beraot. You need to make these corner pieces around the well that will allow it to be considered a Reshut HaYachid, a private domain. Aval Adam, but a person who himself wants to drink, mitapes ve'oleh, as we turn to Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph, now we're at the very top of the page, mitapes ve'oleh, mitapes ve'ored. Very simply, let him climb down into the well and drink directly. Why does he have to draw water out of the well? Why does he have to make the whole area enclosed in order to draw water out of the well? Now, if you tell your cow to climb down into the well, that's the last time you're going to see her. Right, so you can't do that. But you could climb down into the well and take the water without having to draw it out of the well. So you wouldn't need these corner pieces to create an enclosure. But for the cow, she's not going to be able to do that. So you have to draw the water out. But didn't Rav Yitzchak say that Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said they only allowed pasei beraot for a well of a live spring. In other words, mayim chayim, an actual spring. Not just for collected water, because collected water runs out. So they didn't want you to make an enclosure around this well because the water is going to run out anyway, and it's low quality water. But if we're just talking about water that's going to be given to your animals anyway, what do they care about what the quality of the water is? They're not drinking Perrier, they're not concerned about that. So what's the problem? So ve'ila behema mali hayim mali mikunasin. Right, so if we're just talking about the animal here, what difference does it make to Bessie the cow if she drinks, find what's that really good water that they put on the tables in the restaurant? Pellegrino water, or it's just tap water? It doesn't matter. So the answer is that that basically, as Rashi explains it, since the rabbis were really lenient here to allow you to make corner pieces be counted as walls, just these corner boards to be counted as walls, that they demarcate the corners alone, so therefore they wanted they would only allow it to be justified if the water was of a high quality. In other words, it's the water that's really allowing you to do this. It's the fact that there's water there. And not just any water is chashuv. It has to be mayim chashuvim, it has to be high quality water that is justifying you making this enclosure. So even though it's true from the animal's aesthetic standpoint, it doesn't make a difference. From the standpoint of the water, is this really water that's worth making an enclosure around? You have to look at the quality of the water. It has to be good water. Gufa, we go back to what we said before, that it says that they only allowed you really to make this enclosure because you have to draw water for the animal. A person can climb down. But if it's so wide that you can't really climb into the well, because imagine a really wide well. So a very narrow well, you have the ability to scale down the well. But a very wide well, what are you going to do? You're going to get, we're going to have to get, mountain climbing equipment and go down. It's not going to work. So then even for the human beings, you're allowed to bring up the water in that case. And then we said and then it says, V'lo yimalei adam mayim v'yiten lefnei behemto, v'al v'shofech lefnei behem v'shotam eleha. We learned this halacha before, that it says you can't draw the water and then give your animal to drink directly, holding the bucket in your hand and giving the cow to drink. You have to take the water and pour it out and let the animal drink of its own accord. Now the Gemara says, Matkif la Rav Anan raised an objection, Imkein maho ilu paseh beraot. If that's the case, that you can't give your animal to drink directly, what's the point of having this enclosure? So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? Maho ilu limalot, man. What do you mean? How does it help? You needed to draw the water out of the well. You couldn't, because the water technically is in a private domain, Reshut HaYachid. You want to draw it into a public domain, you need an enclosure. Why does it say that the head and the majority of the cow's body have to be within the enclosure for it to drink? If you're not allowed to give it to drink anyway, you're going to leave the water there for the animal to drink. So what do you care how much of the body of the animal is in the enclosure? If you were giving the animal to drink, we have to be concerned that if the animal is not in the enclosure, it might move and you'll follow it and you'll carry the bucket of water with you. But if you're putting down the bucket of water anyway, and the animal is going to come and drink by itself, you don't need to worry how much the animal extends itself into the enclosure, because if the animal decides to move out of the enclosure, it moves out. It's not your problem. The animal will come and go as it pleases if that's the case. Amar Abaye says that the answer that we already saw in the previous daf, that very interesting. Even the Gemara says etc., etc. Why does the Gemara say etc., etc.? Because we already on the last daf did this case 3 times or 2 or 3 times. It didn't want to have to explicate the whole thing again and repeat it. But basically what it's talking about is this very specific case. There's a very specific situation in which you're not allowed to directly give the animal to drink. You can only pour out into its larger container. And that is where there is some kind of a large vessel for the animal to drink from, which has the dimensions of a Reshut HaYachid. It's 10 tefachim tall, it's 4 tefachim wide, it has the dimensions of a private domain in its own right, and it extends into the public domain, which means that the animal could be standing even in the public domain, or at least the body of this vessel is resting in the public domain. You are in the private domain because you are within this enclosure. You're within the enclosure with the well. Right? So you can, and the one end of this vessel extends into where you are. So it's no problem. You could take the water and you could pour it in from your small vessel into the big vessel. Because the big vessel is a private domain, you're a private domain. But the where the large vessel extends to is a public domain. So what was the concern? We said the concern was that maybe you're going to see that there's something wrong with the big vessel and you're going to walk around to try to fix it because it's not flowing properly. You're going to be standing in the public domain and you're going to end up carrying your bucket back into the private domain. Just to give you an idea of what this looks like for those who were not here yesterday and didn't get to see the nifty illustrations that we have in this book with the full color illustrations here. This is talking about a setup like this. So in this setup, which is illustration number 135, you see that the animals are drinking from this large vessel. These are the pasei beraot. This is the enclosed area for the well. You're standing in here. You're invisible in this picture for some reason, but you're standing here pouring water into the large vessel. The large vessel is a private domain. In this, the cows are also standing in a private domain, but that doesn't really matter. The point is that the body of this vessel is in the public domain, see, because this is public domain. Within here is private domain, because these are the corner pieces, right? So you're standing here. The problem is, what if there's a problem over here and it's not flowing? You're going to walk out over here to fix it, bring your bucket back into this area. You just carried it from the public to the private without even realizing it. And that's the case where you're not. That's why they say if you have a situation like that, where the large vessel that the animals are drinking from is resting in a public domain but it is itself a private domain, and you're pouring into it, you cannot hold your bucket. You can just pour your bucket into the large vessel and leave it. You cannot hold the bucket because we're concerned you're going to bring it with you. Okay, that's why it says v'chule. Amar Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Rav. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said that Rav said, "Eina burganin bebavel v'lo pasei berot b'chutz ha'aretz." There are two halachot that don't apply, that are geographically determined. The first one is ein burganin bebavel. Burganin means that basically you're not allowed to go with 2,000 amot outside the city limits on Shabbat, right? But if at the point of basically 70 amot or so, there's a small hut of some sort, then now you can extend the city limit. In other words, let's say you go out of the city limit 70 amot and there's a little hut there. Okay, it's not really a house, but it's a little hut. We can start the techum, we can start the border from here. You walk a little bit further, another 70 amot, there's another little hut. You say, you know what? We could start the border from here. Then another little hut. So even though you might say to yourself, really, I'm very far outside the city limits by now, but the fact is that there's a little house. So as long as there's a little house and it's not too far outside the city limits, we're still considering it an extension of the city limit. You haven't walked out of the city limit yet, so you still have another 2,000 amot that you can walk, and another 2,000 amot until you're out of the city limit completely. And any small hut within 70 amot of the city limit is an extension of the city limit. Within 70 amot of that is still considered an extension of the city limit. So theoretically, you could extend it, thousands of amot if you keep having these small huts along the way. But he says in Bavel, there's no such thing. And the reason why this doesn't exist in Bavel is because they had too much flooding. And so these small huts were not reliable. They would be washed away. They were too temporary. So therefore, we couldn't rely on them for extending the techum. And pasei beraot, this idea that around a well you can make a makeshift kind of an enclosure, just making the corners, just demarcating corners, and two amot on a right angle with one another. That is only in Israel, not in chutz la'aretz. Okay. So he says, so what's the reason? Borganin babavel lo deshuchiche bidkei. Why can't you have these little huts to extend the techum in Bavel? Because there are too many floods. It's going to wash away your huts. But and outside of Israel, why can you not enclose a well just putting corner pieces in? The reason is because there were not a lot of yeshivot. And what were the two reasons they allowed pasei beraot? One was for people who were coming up for olei regalim, people who were coming up for the holiday and they had to camp outside and they needed to be able to access the wells without bringing water from a well into the public domain. And the other case where they allowed it was for people who were coming to study, because many students, talmidim, would come and stay in Yerushalayim or stay in Tzfat or stay wherever in order to learn with the Chachamim in that area. And they also had to camp out like Woodstock style. So they needed to be able to do it. Aval ipcha avdinan. But the reverse we can do. Meaning, in Bavel you can put pasei beraot, if there are wells in Bavel, you can put these corner pieces around them in order to draw water, because there were lots of Talmidei Chachamim in Bavel, lots of yeshivot where people would come and camp out like groupies. Here people camp out to get into Best Buy on Black Friday, but back then people camped out to learn Torah. That was a much better reason, right? Now, and that's what they would do. And in other areas in Chutz La'aretz, you could rely on these huts to extend the tchum of the city, because there were not floods that would wash them away. Ika de amrei samsei amar Rav Yirmiyah amar Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba amar Rav ein borganin upasei beraot lo bebavel velo b'chutz la'aretz. That the other version of this statement was that no, neither in the diaspora nor in Bavel can you have either of these things. Okay, according to the first version, you can enclose wells in Bavel, but you can't rely on huts to extend the Techum. And you can rely on huts to extend the Techum outside of Israel and Bavel, but you can't rely on makeshift enclosures to enclose wells. According to the second version, you cannot rely on makeshift enclosures to enclose wells, nor can you rely on huts to extend the Techum, neither in Bavel nor anywhere else outside of Israel. Why? That in Bavel you cannot rely on huts to extend the Techum, because there are floods that wash away the huts. And in other places in Chutz La'aretz you can't rely on huts because there are too many thieves. They might come steal your hut. Because huts were, I guess, they were mobile. You could move them around. Similarly, in Bavel, you can't even make... See, in Chutz La'aretz, we understand why you can't enclose wells, because the only reason to enclose wells with corner pieces was for a mitzvah. Either the mitzvah that you were coming for visiting the Beit HaMikdash, or because you were coming to learn Torah. You wouldn't come to any other country to learn Torah besides Bavel or Eretz Yisrael. But the other reason why you can't enclose wells, even in Bavel, is because there's lots of water in Bavel. Why would you need to? There's water everywhere. That's why we talked about flooding. So you don't need to do that in Bavel. You can always find water. Amar le Rav Chisda le Marei berei de Rav Huna berei de Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba. So Rav Chisda said to Marei, the son of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, Amrei atitu mi barnish lebekin ishtad de Daniel tahavat lata parsei b'shabata. Amai samchitu. He said to him, I heard that you went all the way from Barnish to the Beit Knesset of Daniel, which is 3 parsaot, a very long distance to walk on Shabbat. How did you walk so far out of the city limit on Shabbat? What were you relying on? Abur Ganin. Were you relying on the fact that there are little huts spaced out 70? It has to be within 70 and 2/3 of an amah from the city limit. You're relying on the fact that there are huts all the way from Barnish all the way to the Beit Knesset of Daniel. Ha'amar Avua de'avua mishmei de Rav. Your father's father said in the name of Rav, because this is the grandson of Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, right? Your father's father said in the name of Rav, Ein borganin bebavel. There are no huts in Bavel, meaning we don't rely on that idea of huts. So nafak v'achavele hanhu matvata demival'an b'shiv'im ama v'shirayim. He went out and showed him that there were not huts, but ruins, basically, of cities that were spaced out within 70 and 2/3 amah from the city limit, and then within 70 and 2/3 amah of that there was another one, and another one, and another one. So we weren't dealing with huts that could be washed away in a little bit of flooding. We were dealing with actual ruins which weren't functional anymore as cities, but were still once functional, and certainly at least more significant because they're more permanent than cities. They're not going. Than huts. They're not going anywhere. So they were allowed to extend it to Chum. And now we get into the Agadah that I promised you. Okay, so Amar Rav Chisda, that you're named after him, you know that? Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Chisda, Darish Mari bar Mar. Mari, the son of Mar, said the following drasha: Mai dechtiv lechol techla ra'iti ketz rechava mitzvatecha meod. That for every pursuit I have seen an end, but your commandment is very broad. Okay, what does it mean? Davar ze amaro David velo perisho. This thing David said, but he never explained. You're saying that it's wider than anything, but how wide is it, right? How wide is the Torah? Amaro Eov velo perisho. Eov said it, and he didn't explain it. Yechezkel, Amaro Yechezkel velo perisho. The Navi Yechezkel said it, and he didn't explain it. Ad sheba Zechariah ben Ido Persho. Until Zechariah ben Ido, the Navi, came and finally explained how vast the Torah actually is. Amaro David velo Persho dichtiv lechol tichla reiti ketzer chava v'mitzvatecha me'od. So we already said, David said the famous line, to every pursuit I've seen an end, but your mitzvah is very broad. Okay, so that's when David said it in Tehillim. Amaro Iyov velo Persho, Iyov said it and he didn't explain it. Dichtiv, arukam me'eretz midah urchava miniyam. Because Iyov said it's longer than the wisdom of Hashem is longer than the earth in its measure, and it's broader than the sea. So again, he's saying it's greater than them, but how much greater? We want to know exactly how much. Amaro Yechezkel velo Peresho. Yechezkel said it and he didn't explain it. Dechtiv, as it says, Vayifros otat lefanai vehi kituva panim ve'achor. Ve'katuv, what does it say? Ve'katuv aleha kinim vahege vahi. Okay, so this is Yechezkel speaking. He says that Hashem showed to me this scroll. He opened it up before me, and it was written on the front and back, and it had kinim, hege, vahi. This is like kinim are lamentations. Hege means something more positive, it would seem. Vahi would also seem to mean something more negative. But the point is, it had lots of content. Kinim zo puranutan shel tzadikim ba'olam hazeh. What does it mean, kinim were written on it? This is not kinim with a kaf, which means lice, makat kinim. It's kinim with a kuf. Kinot, right? Kinot. It means like lamentations, right? This is the suffering of the righteous in this world. V'chenu omer kinahi v'konenua. That, like it says, it's a kina, a lamentation. V'konenuha, and you should lament over it. You should lament it, right? V'hege, what's hege? Zo matan secharan shel tzadikim lati lavo. This is a positive thing. The reward of the righteous people in the future. V'chenu omer, as it says, alei gayon b'chinor, right? Upon this, I reflect with a harp, right? Like we say in Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat. So that higayon b'chinor is referring to, what does it say? Tzadik katamar yifrach, right? It's talking about the success of the righteous person in the future. So that's what it means when it says v'hege. Vahi zoi puranutan shel reshayim latid lavo. And he, at the end, what is the third thing that he saw on the scroll? He saw the suffering of the wicked people latid lavo in the future. V'chen hu omer, as it says, hoveh al hoveh tavo. Well, that's right. That's that. An event after an event will come, and that's talking about the punishment of the wicked in the future, as which is being described by the Navi Yechezkel. But in any case, he saw a scroll that was very large and had all this stuff written on the front and back, which is all the wisdom of Hashem and Hashem's whole plan. But again, he doesn't tell us the exact measurement, right? So David mentioned it, Iyov mentioned it, Yechezkel mentioned it. We still want to know what's the measurement here. So Ad Sheba Zechariah ben Ido, finally the Navi Zechariah came and he said, Upereshon, he explained, Vayomer Elai, Ma ata ro'eh, because Hashem said to me, what do you see? Va'omar, and I said, Ani ro'eh Megillah Afah. I see, now this, some people interpret Megillah Afah as meaning a flying Megillah, like flying in midair. Like Ofef, like it was, Ofef could mean flying. But it's interpreted here as folded. A folded Megillah. And how large is it? He said, Orkah esrim ba'ama. Its length is 20 amot. And virochbah eser ba'ama. And its width is 10 amot. And esrim ba'ama, that's what it says, V'chi pashatla havyala esrin be'esrin. And if you unfold it, obviously, it's folded over, it would be 20 by 20. Right? Because it's folded over so that you have 20 and 10. But if you unfolded it, it would be 20 and 20. Okay? Uchtiv, and it says, Hi kituva panim ve'achor. And we know that Yechezkel said that whatever this Megillah is, has written on it. We're assuming that they saw the same vision of all of God's plan, all of God's wisdom, just that Yechezkel didn't tell us how large the scroll was that he saw it written on. He just told us it was written front and back. Now let's say it's written front and back, and you take whatever was written on the back and you put it on the front. So if you have 20 by 20, and now you have 20 by 20, so now you have 40 by 40, right? You're gonna have to extend it. So V'chi kalaf la kama havya. So what are you going to have? If you take whatever's written, it's just length, right? It's not going to be more width. It's just going to be more length, right? Because if you take what's written on the other side, it's going to be, we're assuming it's the same width, so it's just more length going down. So you're going to have another 20. So you're going to have 40 by 20. Okay? So 800 square amot, basically. Right? Because you're going to have 20 amot by 40 amot. 40 amot length, because you took whatever was written on the other side, you put it on one side, now you have it all on one long scroll. 40 by 20, 800 amot square. And what else do we know? So v'chikalaf lakam havyala arba'in be'esrin. Okay, uchtiv mi madad v'sha'olomayim v'shamayim bazeret tiken. And what do we say about the universe? It says in Yeshayahu that Hashem made the universe bazeret tiken, which Rashi says is half an amah. Meaning, the universe is, according to this, Rashi says, Hatzi Amma al Hatzi Amma of Hakshel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By Hashem's measurement, it's only a half an Amma by a half an Amma. So if the universe is one of Hashem's Amot is only half by a half, and this is 800 square, a half an Amma is what is going to be basically a quarter of a square Amma. Right, a quarter of a square amah, and here we're talking about 800 square amot. So we're talking about 3,200 amot. Right, it's going to be 3,200. Isn't that correct? Because if it's 800 amot and you're taking a half an amah, it's 800 square amot. Right? If it were just 800 regular amot, and we were talking about just a linear, so then a half of that. We just multiply it by 2 and get 1,600. But since we're talking about square amot, we're going to end up with 3,200 amot. Okay, so what do we see? Nimtza kol ha'olam kulo echad mishloshet alafim umatayim b'Torah. You're going to have 1/3200th. So the entire universe is only 1/3200th of the Torah. Because this scroll in Hashem's measurements is going to be 800 square amot versus the half by a half amah that He created the world out of. Pretty impressive, huh? So, yeah, you can see the Rashi on the side explains exactly how you calculate it, a square amot, and you make the calculation. Okay. So, Va'amar Rav Chisda said, Darish Mari Barmar said the following, Drashamai Dichtiv, V'hinei Shinei Duda'it Te'enim, Mu'adim L'fnei Hechal Hashem, Hadud Ehad Te'enim Tovot Me'od, Ki Te'enei, and we turn to the next page, Habakurot, it should be. So it's describing a further nivu'ah in Yirmiyahu here, that he saw 2 baskets of figs. The first one had very good ones. What? Bakurot means like the first fruits, very good, very very ripe, good figs. And the second one, v'adud ehad te'enim ra'ot me'od asher lo te'achalna meroah. Okay, as we turn to page Kaf Aleph Amud Bet, and the second basket has figs that are so bad that you wouldn't even eat them. They're so bad. So the first ones are outstanding. Second one's bad. So Te'enim Matovot, what are these figs that Yirmiyahu is seeing that are very good? Elu Tzadikim Gimurim. These are the perfect Tzadikim, very fine Tzadikim. They're placed before Hashem. Te'enim Haraot Elu Rishaim Gimurim, and the bad figs are the bad, totally bad people. V'shem Matomar. Maybe you're going to tell me avad sivram ubatil sikuyam. Maybe you're going to tell me that they have no hope. This is like sivram, when we always say ve'al tivishenu misivreno, right? In the Selichot. Don't embarrass us from our hope. We hope to God that He's going to save us. Don't embarrass us, right? I'm relying on you, Hashem. Don't embarrass. So sivra means, maybe you'll say they have no chance. Sikuyam means chance, like even in modern Hebrew, en sikuy, right? Oh, really? Okay, so there you go. So also in Hebrew. So maybe you'll say they have no hope, they have no chance. Talmud Lamar, Hadudaim natnu reach. Right, this is from the Shir HaShirim. Now, those dudaim are talking about the flowers, the dudaim that like Reuven brought to his mother, right? But here we're talking about, when we say dudaim, we're talking about baskets of figs. But still, the reference is, meaning that even the bad figs have natnu reach. They give a good smell. Okay? Both of them, the tzaddikim and the rishaim, are both going to turn out, good in the end. Darash Rava said a drasha, my dichtiv adudaim natnu reach. What does it mean that the dudaim, that these flowers are giving off a beautiful scent? Elu bachorei Yisrael, shelo ta'amu ta'amchet. That the pasuk, we know the whole pasuk. Everybody knows Shir Hashirim. Adudaim natnu reach val pitachenu kol megadim. Right, that the flowers are giving off a beautiful scent, and at our door is all kinds of dainty things. Chadashim gam yishanim, new things and old things. Dodi tzafanti lach, that I saved for you. Right, that's what the woman is saying to the beloved. Remember in Shir Hashirim when we learned it. Now, so what does it mean? Hadudaim natnu reach. It means el bachorei Yisrael tamu tamchet. This is talking about the young men of Israel who've never done anything wrong. They're innocent. They're pure. They haven't sinned. What does it mean that on our doors are all kinds of beautiful things, migadim, delights? These are the women who tell their openings to their husbands, meaning they tell their husbands when it's the time of the month that they can't have relations with them. So they talk with them, they tell them when it's the right time, when it's the wrong time. They guard the purity of the family. Another version of this is that they keep their openings to their husbands, meaning that they're faithful to their husbands. Okay, so it's talking about hadudaim natnu reach is the men. The men are so wonderful. The women are so pure and wonderful. Hadashim gam yishanim, new and old. So dodi tafanti lach, I saved for you the new and the old. What does it mean? I saved for you the new and the old. Amra knesset Yisrael lifnei hakadosh baruch hu. The congregation of Israel, the Jewish people, said to the Holy One, blessed be He, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the world, Harbe gezerot gazarti al atzmi, yoter mimar shegazarta alai v'kiyamtim. More than what you decreed upon me, I decreed upon myself. Meaning we accepted upon ourselves even more mitzvot, even more gezerot, even more obligations and responsibilities than you gave us. So Yeshanim, the old, that's what Hashem gave us. Yeah, Chadashim are what the rabbis instituted. Even the Nevi'im, the later Nevi'im, gave us lots of mitzvot, halachot, muktzeh, not speaking about things on Shabbat that you're not allowed to do. That's from Nevi'im. These are things that come from the Nevi'im. Enjoying Shabbat, oneg Shabbat, all these things. So Amar le Rav Chizda lahu midirabanan. Rav Chizda said to one of the rabbis, who was telling over. They used to have these rabbis who would recite agadot, or they would recite memorized statements of the chachamim in front of the scholars, and then the scholars would analyze them. Okay, so they had somebody who was in charge, basically, of telling over the text, because they didn't have them in books, and then they would analyze the text as it was repeated to them. So he said to him, Misha Mialach, Rav Chizda asked one of the reciters of Agadah, have you heard anything, Chadashim gam yishanim ahu? What does it mean, new and old things? What is it referring to? Now, we gave an explanation already, right? That Chadashim means the newer gezerot and halachot that the rabbis or the Nevi'im developed. And Yishanim, the old things, are the things that came from the Torah. But Amar Lei said to him, Elo mitzvot kalot, ve'elo mitzvot chamurot. That when it says Chadashim and Yishanim, it means the lighter mitzvot and the more stringent mitzvot. Apparently, he means the Chadashim means the new ones, mean the lighter ones, the mitzvot that are not as strict, and the mitzvot that are very stringent, those are Yishanim. So he said to him, Amar lei v'chi Torah pa'amim nitna. Are you telling me that Hashem gave the Torah at different times? He gave the harder mitzvot longer ago, so they're called Yishanim, and he gave the newer mitzvot, the easier ones, later. What it means is actually Yishanim and Chadashim means that the mitzvot that were given from the Torah, the original mitzvot, those are Yishanim, the old ones. Chadashim means the newer ones, the rabbinic mitzvot. We keep not only what the Torah told us, but also what the Chachamim and the Nevi'im told us as well. The Rosh Rava said the following drasha: Mai dichtiv. What does it mean? That v'yoter mehema beni hizaher. It says at the end of Kohelet, more than this, my son, be careful. Asot sfarim harbe en ketz. It says, you can make an endless number of books. Right? Don't go overboard making books. Don't add to this. Right? V'yoter mehema beni hizaher. Be careful going further than this book. Because Kohelet says, there's enough. Just study this book. Don't write another book. You don't need any more books. Beni hizaher, what does this mean? B'divrei sofrim, yoter midivrei Torah. Why does he say, what he means is, v'yoter mehema, more than you're careful about these, more than you're careful about the words of Torah, be careful about the words of the rabbis. Shedivrei Torah yesh bahen aseh v'lo ta'aseh. Because the words of Torah, they have positive and negative commandments. V'divrei sofrim kol ha'over al divrei sofrim chayav mitah. But anybody who goes against the words of the rabbis is chayav mitah. is worthy of the death penalty. And this is also in Masekhet Berachot. They ask, why is it that you're so careful about the Divrei Sofrim? The reason is because I'll tell you why. Because if you violate the laws of the Torah, it's not because the rabbis are greater than Hashem. It's because if you violate the words of the Torah, a person feels a sense of guilt. They're violating Hashem's will. They understand they can't do that again. It's a mistake. A person violates the words of the rabbis, they're really undermining the authority of the Chachamim. They're really undermining the whole system of the Torah, the whole Torah Sheba'al Peh. Once you start undermining the authority of the Chachamim, really you have no Torah Sheba'al Peh anymore. You lose everything. And that's why it's such a dangerous thing. You violate one law of the Torah, another law of the Torah, it could be bad. It could be very bad. But you still recognize the Torah and you still recognize Hashem. When you violate the words of the Chachamim, you're undermining them. And undermining the Chachamim, then we have nothing. Shema tomar im yesh ben mamash mipnei shelo nichtavu. So maybe you'll say, if these laws of the rabbis are so great, how come they weren't written in the Torah? Why didn't Hashem write them? Amar Kra, the pasuk says, "Asut sfarim harbe in ketz, velag harbe yigyat basar." Because Kohelet tells you, making so many books, there's no end to it. They didn't want to make too many books, and lots of velag harbe and lots of talk. Or lots of meditation, yigyat basar, wearies the flesh. In other words, the rabbis didn't want to make more books. They wanted to make these laws and these rules, but they didn't want to make more literature. Amar Rav Papa Breder Rav Acha bar Ada, Rav Papa, the son of Rav Acha bar Ada, said, Mishmei de Rav Acha bar Ula, in the name of Rav Acha bar Ula, Milamed shekol mal'ig al divrei chachamim, that it says, V'lahag harbe yigyat basar. Literally, that means a lot of talk or a lot of meditation will weary the flesh. But they're interpreting it as vela'ag harbe. If you make fun a lot, yigyat basar, it will be pain for the flesh. Meaning that anybody who's mal'ig al divrei chachamim, who insults the words of the chachamim, nidon betzora rotahat, he will be punished with burning excrement. That means burning poop. Nobody wants to be in boiling poop, so watch your mouth. Matzkivla Rava raised an objection. Mi ketiv la'ag, it doesn't say la'ag, hamal'ig, it doesn't say making fun, it says la'ag, studying ketiv. Ela kol hahogeh bahen to'em ta'am basar. It's actually saying a positive thing, not a negative thing. It's saying velahag harbe. If you study the words of the Chachamim, it will taste like meat. To'em ta'am basar. Yegiat basar means you will taste the substance of it. If you study them, if you take them seriously, you'll see the beauty of the words of the Chachamim and the substance of it. It's not threatening you and telling you you're going to be burned in excrement. It's telling you that you're going to have the beauty and enjoyment and satisfaction of studying the words of the Chachamim. The Rambam explains this homiletically. He says, what does it mean that you'll be in boiling excrement? He says that it's not a literal thing, but what it means is that it shows what a shameful, low person you are, that you don't appreciate the words of the Chachamim. He says, what greater excrement, boiling poop is there than a person who doesn't recognize the value of the Chachamim, because he's a loser. He loses out on the opportunity to learn from them. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Maseh Rabbi Akiva, there was an event with Rabbi Akiva, Shaya Chovush Beveit Hasurin, that not infrequently Rabbi Akiva found himself in jail for teaching Torah, which was illegal at the time. And Vahaya Rabbi Yoshua HaGarsi, Misharato, and Rabbi Yoshua HaGarsi would bring him stuff. He would bring him provisions. They would always bring water to Rabbi Akiva in the jail. It wasn't like today where the jail is a country club, and they serve you food, and they ask you if you need anything, and you get all kinds of benefits. They didn't have that back then. One day the guard of the jail stopped Rabbi Yoshua Amar when he said to him, you brought too much water for your master Rabbi Akiva today. We're going to spill this out. Did you want to dig the entire jail and make a well here and draw more water? He was making fun of him. You're bringing too much water. Shafach chetzian, he spilled out half of it, and the guard gave him back half of it to bring to Rabbi Akiva. When he came to Rabbi Akiva, Amar lo Yoshua, don't you know that I'm an old man, Rabbi Akiva said, and my life is dependent on yours? How can you bring me so little water? He didn't know why he brought him so little water. Sahlo kol oto me'ora. He explained to him the entire thing that happened. How the guard stopped him at the door. He wouldn't let him bring the water. Amarlo ten li mayim she'tol yadai. He said, give me the water so I can wash my hands netilat yadayim. What? Amarlo lishtot en magi'in. You don't even have enough here to drink. Litol yadecha magi'in. You're going to wash your hands with the water that you do have when you don't even have enough water to drink? Amarlo, he said, what can I do? Shehayavim alein mitah. If I don't wash my hands, I'm violating the words of the Chachamim, and any kol ha'over al divrei Chachamim chayav mita. I don't want to do something against the words of the Chachamim. I'll be liable to the death penalty. Mutav amut mitat atzmi. Better that I die by my own hand, not drinking v'lo evor al dat chaverai, and that I not go against the words of the Chachamim. Amru, they said, lo ta'am klum ad shehevi lo mayim v'natal yadav. He refused to eat anything, Rabbi Akiva said, until they brought him the water and they let him wash his hands with it. Kishisham o chachamim badavar. When the rabbis heard this, Amru, they said, ma beziknu tokach. If you think he was like this, so staunch in his observance of even the rabbinic commandments when he was in his old age, in his biyalduto alachat kama v'chama, when he was younger, he was even more staunch in his observance. Uma bebeta asurin kach. And if when he was in jail, usually when a person's in jail, they say, okay, now I got to make compromises on my religious observance. How religious am I going to be in jail, right? Now, of course, nowadays, the people who get put into jail actually committed crimes, the religious people, and when they ask for kosher food or Shabbat or whatever, you're like, what a hypocrite. The guy did, stole money, and he laundered money, and whatever, or he abused people, God forbid, and now he's in jail, he deserves whatever he gets, and now we're going to make accommodations for him to be kosher. But these people were actually, political prisoners, basically. They hadn't done anything wrong. Anyway, if in jail he was so careful, then when he wasn't in jail and he had the freedom to do what he wanted, so he was certainly very, very rigorous and careful and meticulous in his observance of rabbinic commandments. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel, Rav Yehuda said that Shemuel said, B'sha'ah shetiken Shlomo Eruvin untilat yadayim. When Shlomo HaMelech made 2 decrees. One was Eruvin. That was the rule that a person, that when you have a courtyard of shared dwellings, even though it's enclosed with a wall, you still need to make Eruvei Chatzerot. You need to make that the residents of the Chatzer take some bread and say, we're all one family. Because otherwise, even though the concern was like this, that people would say, well, this area of the courtyard, it happens to be enclosed, but we all share it. Different households share this one big yard. So really it's a public area. If we can carry in this public area, why can't I carry in the marketplace? So Shlomo said that's a good thought. People are going to think that, so we're going to require them to do Eruvei Chatzerot, to unite together, even to be able to use the courtyard to carry. So they won't make a mistake and confuse the courtyard with the public domain. And Netilat Yadayim, he required that people wash their hands before eating bread, right? Even not the Kohanim, even ordinary people have to wash their hands before eating bread. Yatzda bat kol ve'amra, a divine voice came out and said, B'nai, my son, im chacham libecha, if your heart is wise, yismach libi gam ani, then my heart will also rejoice. In other words, he was so happy. Ve'omer, and it says, chacham b'nai, my son is wise, ve'samach libi, and my heart rejoices. Ve'ashiva chorefi davar, and I will give back to those who insult me a word. Meaning that Shlomo HaMelech made his father David proud. He made Hashem was very pleased with Shlomo, that Shlomo understood how people think, he understood how people operate, and therefore he made gezerot to protect the Torah, but also understanding how people think, that a person will think that they won't understand that enclosure is the definition of a private domain, for example. They'll think that, if it's public, it's used by people, that's a public domain. And if I can carry from my house into this public, why can't I carry from my house into the shuk? They won't see the difference. So he understood that problem, and he made his laws accordingly. Darash Rava said a drasha, my dichtiv, lecha dodi netzeh sadeh. We go back to Shir HaShirim. My beloved, let us go out to the fields. Nalina bakifarim, let us spend the night or sleep bakifarim, among the flowers. Nashkim ala kiramim, we'll get up and go to the vineyards. Nir'em parachai gefen pitachas emadar, we will see if the vine has begun to bud and the grapes have begun to grow, and the pomegranates have blossomed. There I will give you my friendship. Okay, so lecha dodi netzeh sadeh. Come, my dear, let's go to the field. What does this mean? The Jewish people said to Hashem, Ribono shel olam, master of the world, al tidineni ki yoshevei kirachim shesh ben gazel va'arayot u'shvat shav u'shvat sheker. Don't think of me, don't judge me like urban dwellers who steal, and they're involved in all kinds of promiscuity and false oaths because they do business, so they lie and they cheat and they steal. Don't judge me like that. El netzeh sadeh, let's go out to the fields. What does that mean? Bo v'arecha talmidei chachamim she'osekin b'torah mitoch hadachak. Let's go look at the Talmidei Chachamim who live in the fields, meaning they have nothing, they live in poverty and they study Torah. That's why I'm saying, don't look at me as an urban person who's living in high society and I have all these luxuries and I take all these, and I do all these immoral things. Look at the Jewish people for its poorest people. Our poorest people are our Talmidei Chachamim who sacrifice everything to learn Torah. Nalina Bakfarim, let's spend the night in the Bakfarim, in the villages. Okay, why? Al Tikre Bakfarim, don't say the villages, Ela Bakofrim. Okay, look at the kofrim, look at those who deny God. What's it talking about? That I'll show you people in the world, the nations of the world, who you've given them so much blessing and they still deny you and reject you. Why are you giving them blessing? Give the Jewish people blessing. We at least have a group of people who are dedicated to you. Let's go to the vineyards. This is a reference to when it says let's go to the vineyards, it means let's go to the Batei Knesset, to the synagogues, and to the houses of study. Geffen. Let's see if the vineyard if the vine has budded. Elu Balei Mikra. These are the people studying Tanakh. Pitach HaSimadar. Let's see if the grape has begun to mature. Elu Balei Mishnah. These are the people studying the Mishnah. Henetzo Arimonim. Let's see if the pomegranate has blossomed. Elu Balei Gemara. These are those who are studying Gemara. Sham etene dodai lach. There I will give my companionship to you. Arecha kivodi v'godli. There I will show you my honor and my greatness. Shevach banai uvnotai, the praise of my sons and daughters. In other words, this is really our praise, that we're dedicated to the Torah on all different levels, and that we can show Hashem. We don't want Hashem to focus on the parts of our society and our community that are the city slickers who are not living the life of Torah, but we want Him to focus on the aspect of our communities that are our spiritual strength. Amar Rav Hamnuna said, what does it mean that Shlomo HaMelech said 3,000 mishalim, 3,000 metaphors or allegories? It means Vayi Shiro Hamisha Va'alef, and he said 1,500 songs, poems. That on every halakha of the Torah he could give you 3,000 mishalim, allegories or examples or metaphors to illustrate it. In other words, he was a master educator is what that means. You can look at the book of Mishlei. He uses examples and uses metaphor to teach, parables to teach. So he could give you parables to any halakha that you wanted to understand. He could give perfect examples that any learner could understand it. That was the type of teacher that Shlomo HaMelech was. Al kol davar v'davar shel sofreim. And what does it mean, 1,500 shir? On every rabbinic commandment, chamisha v'elef ta'amim. He could give you 1,500 explanations of every rabbinic law as well. The Rosh Rava said the following drasha, May dichtiv, v'yoter shaya kohelet chacham, od limed da'at et ha'am, v'izen v'chaker. Okay, tiken mishalim harbe. It says in Kohelet that beyond the fact that Kohelet, which is another name for Shlomo, was very wise, he taught knowledge to the people. V'izen, he listened. V'chaker, he investigated, and he established mishalim harbe. He established many parables and examples and illustrations to teach the people. Limed da'at et ha'am. What does it mean that he taught the people wisdom? De'agmerei b'simanei ta'amim. He taught them with simanei ta'amim. He taught them different kinds of simanim and mnemonics to remember things. Rashi says, Kavala, Masoret, he gave them a tradition, v'simanim and signs, ben batevot mikra, ben bagirsa shel mishnah, that they had ta'amim, and it's talking about Tamei Mikra also, that when you would read the Torah with the ta'amim, with the trope, right, or you read the Navi or the Tanakh with the trope, with the Tamei Mikra, you remember it. They also used to have ta'amim for mishnah. In the Sephardic communities, in the Syrian community, and in the Moroccan community, they have a masoret also of Ta'amei Mishnah, for reading Mishnah with Ta'amim. This goes back, it's a very ancient practice, to remember it and to be able to memorize the text. And it says, Ve'asbira, and he explained it to them. With what was similar to it. In other words, he not only taught them to memorize, but he also gave them analogies and examples so they'd be able to retain it, right? Like stories. They always help us to retain things. He listened and he investigated. He established many mishalim. Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Eliezer. that Ula said, that Rabbi Eliezer said, this is a very, very famous midrash about Shlomo HaMelech. Batchila hayta Torah doma lekfifa she'en la uznaim. In the beginning, the Torah was like a basket with no handles. Ad sheba Shlomo v'asa la uznaim. So Shlomo came and he made handles for it. Okay, what that means is that when you don't have handles, you can only pick a basket up if you hold it from the bottom, meaning if you have the whole thing. There's no way to access it easily unless you have the whole thing in your hands. But what Shlomo did was, he created a situation, Mishalim, stories and parables and examples enable the beginning learner to take it, it's more manageable. There's another example that it says that the Torah was like a well, and there was a bucket, but there was no rope. And Shlomo was the one who made a rope so that you could lower the bucket into the well and draw the water out, which means to say that he made it accessible. He made something very deep accessible by connecting the people to the subject step by step by step, like a chain. Kevutzotav taltalim. It talks about how the locks, the hair of the beloved in Shir HaShirim was made into locks. Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Mar Ukva. Rav Chizda said that Mar Ukva said, "Melamed sheyesh lidrosh al kol kotz v'kotz." That's kivutzotav. On every point of the letters, tilei tilim shel halachot. That's what it means. Kivutzotav taltalim is every dot of the letters in the Torah. You can learn many halachot from it. Shechorot ka'orev, black like a raven. So in the literal meaning of Shir HaShirim, it means that the beloved has black hair in very thick locks of black hair. But here it's saying that the thick locks really mean the letters of the Torah, what we can learn from them. And shechorot ka'orev, black as a raven, means b'mi atamotza'an. Where do you find knowledge of these halachot that are kivutzotav taltalim, that can be derived from every little letter? In the people b'mi shemashkim u'ma'ariv alehen lebet hamidrash, the people who get up early and stay late at the Beit Midrash. That's shechorot ka'orev. Shechorot means like shachar. They get up early in the morning. Ke'orev is erev. They stay late. So the people who study Torah really carefully are the ones who access the secret meanings of the Torah. Rabba Amar Rabba says, "B'misha mashchir panav alehen." Somebody who darkens his face over the Torah, meaning he doesn't eat, he doesn't take care, he doesn't pamper himself, he doesn't go for a mani-pedi. So he has a dark face, means that he is studying with great self-sacrifice. Shemashchir panav alehen ka'orev. That's why it says shechorot ka'orev. He darkens his face like a raven. His face becomes dark because he gives up luxury. He doesn't take care of himself because of his intense study. Rava Amar Rava says, "B'misha mesim atzmo achzari al banav al bnei beto ka'orev." Who is the person who knows the secrets? The person who's mean to his family like a raven. Okay, he's cruel to his family. What does that mean? Ki hadar Rav Ada bar Matana, and this is where we're going to end for today. Like it says about Rav Ada bar Matana, Hava ka'azel lebe Rav. When he would go to the yeshiva of Rav, Amra le devitu. His wife said to him, Yanoked didach ma ye'avid laho. Your children, what am I going to do with them? Meaning, how am I going to feed your children? You go away to the Beit Midrash every day, you don't work. So what did he say? Notice what he didn't say. Okay, he didn't say, don't worry, we'll get food stamps, we'll go on welfare, and he didn't say we'll collect tzedakah. He didn't say that. He didn't say I'm in the kollel. He didn't say that. What did he say? Amar la, he said, Mi shalimu kormei ba'agma. There are plenty of reeds in the swamp. What did he mean? He said, go cut some reeds in the swamp, There's lots of wild grass growing in the swamp. Go cut, He said, Rashi says, go take that and grind it up and make some food out of it. In other words, what he's saying is, rough it then. He didn't say, I'll go door to door, ask people for tzedakah so I can learn. He didn't do that like they do today. Well, it's extreme. Okay? It's extreme. There's no question. But is it more extreme than the people who sit in the kollel all day, they make $300 a month, and they make their wife work and raise 10 children? That's not cruel?
Sounds like a good deal.
I mean, at least she doesn't have to work. She just has to go cut reeds in the swamp. It's all relative.
We know it's not right.
Right. Well, to be cruel, right? But I'm saying in the kollel culture, it's the same type of. It's the same thing. A lot of the women, they work all day long. They have 10 children. The husbands don't lift a finger. They're in the kollel all day long. We know that it's not right. No, it's not. I agree with you. It's not. So, but the that's this is coming from the story. It says that Hashem pays back those who hate Him in their face to destroy Him. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, "Ilmale mikra katuv yefshar leomro." That if this pasuk was not written, it would be impossible to say it. Kiviyachol. It's as if ka'adam shnosei masroi al panav umvakesh lashlicho mimenu. It's like a person holding a burden on their body, and they want, on their face, and they want to throw it off. He says that's how Hashem looks at the wicked person. It's like somebody stuck on his face that He wants to throw them off. Okay, obviously it's metaphoric. We don't describe Hashem that way. That's why He says if it were not for the pasuk, we wouldn't be able to say it. Lo ya'acher lesoneo. He doesn't delay for the one who hates him. What does that mean? Amar Rabbi Elah lesoneavu de lo ya'acher, aval ya'acher letzadikim gemurim. He doesn't delay to the one who hates him. In other words, punishment comes quickly, but reward doesn't always come quickly. Dahainu da Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. This is what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says. Mai dichtiv asher nochim mitzavacha hayom. What does it mean? What I command you today la'asotam, to do them. Hayom la'asotam, velo lemachar la'asotam. It says you can only do them today, meaning you can only do the mitzvot in this world. That's why it says I command them to you today to do them. Hayom la'asotam, lemachar lekabel secharam. But you must do that. You must do them today. You can't do them tomorrow. Meaning you can only do the mitzvot in this world, but you cannot receive the reward in this world. The real reward comes in the next world. Amar Rabbi Chagai v'itema Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Rabbi Chagai says, and some say it was Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. My dichtiv erech apayim. Right? Why does it say erech apayim? Erech af mi ba'elei. It should say He extends His anger. Why does it say apayim in the plural? What it means is Ela erech apayim latzadikim, erech apayim larishaim. That there's two types of extension. So Rashi says apayim means panim. It means faces. Okay, ma'arich u'me'acher latzadikim la'atid lavo. Ve'apayim ze'umot ma'arich larishaim u'me'acher puranutam la'olam haba. Meaning that He extends. There are two types of things that Hashem delays. It says that He's very patient. Erech apayim means extending anger, but it means extension in general, both of the good and the bad, meaning that the outcome, the consequences of good deeds are not immediately apparent all the time. A lot of times we feel like we say no good deed goes unpunished, is the saying, right? We feel like even the good, we don't see the results. It's erech apayim also, that Hashem is not in a rush to give consequences, bad and good. Because think about it this way, if you're so insistent that you want your reward right away, you want the benefits, you want the payout right away of your good deeds, Hashem's going to say fine, but then you're also going to get the payout of the bad things right away, and maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want the opportunity to do teshuvah. So fair is fair. Just like Hashem delays the payback of the wicked, He also delays the reward of the righteous. Shabbat shalom.